Oh, sorry.
And after Mickey settles, Tom. And the phone gets answered.
Quiet phone.
That's enough of you. Okay, I think we're good.
All right, we're good?
Yep.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Now, the first question I've got is a hard one.
Okay.
All right, I'd like for you to say your name, and if you'd say my name is, and say your name, and also spell it, please.
Okay. My name is Malena Stone. It's Malena Stone, Stone.
And is it possible that you have what's called a preferred pronoun?
She, woman, her.
Thank you. That's great. And I would like to just start, if I could, with some questions about you.
Okay.
And what I'm interested in is, and you can take this at whatever level you want to, where are you from, and how did you get to where you are now?
I am a Savannah native. I was born and raised right here in Savannah. Left for college and graduate school and came right back home.
And how were you schooled here in Savannah when you were growing up?
So I was a public school kid. We were a fairly poor family, so we lived in pretty much any of the areas of town where you could live cheaply and house a lot of children. So we tended to go to just neighborhood schools and pretty much just came up through the Savannah-Chatham County school system.
And do you mind just saying what schools you went to?
Sure. So let's see if I can remember back that far. So I started out at Charles Hurdy Elementary School, which is no longer there, and then went to Pennsylvania Avenue School, which is also no longer there. And from there, I went to Anderson Street School downtown, which is now a SCAD building, and went to Myers Middle School and graduated from Johnson High School.
And when did you graduate?
1993.
93. So you were in public school. The public schools have been fully integrated by then?
Yes, sir.
And graduated in 93. And then you come from, you're an only child?
I come from a family of 5, so I am the oldest of 4 girls, and then we have one older brother.
And where'd you go to college and all that?
So I went to Berry College up in Rome, Georgia, and, I was kind of the poor kid of the bunch, so took the Greyhound bus to college and went to graduate school at Valdosta State and majored in speech-language pathology with a specialization in early intervention because I've always loved children and always have wanted to, impact children in some way. So for a while, I thought I wanted to work in the medical field, but it turns out I don't like bad smells or blood, so that was not a good fit for me.
Malena, I'm sorry. You have one stray hair.
Okay.
So on your other side, sorry. It's sort of in front of your ear.
Okay, let's see.
Can you help her with that? real
You
quick?
see it?
Right.
Oh, sorry. Let me look.
No, it's one
This
of those.
one right here, right?
I
Yeah.
appreciate it because it would drive me crazy later.
There it is,
like,
right there.
Go back and move that little piece. Is that better?
Got it.
Got it.
Excellent. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue, Tom.
Thanks. Let me go back a little bit to family life, if I may. Tell me a little bit about your dad and your mom, but tell me a little bit about their personal journeys and their faith journeys as well, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I have had a really interesting upbringing, I think, compared to other children that I would consider just normal kids, I guess, because I really got to see my parents' faith journey from a really early age. My dad, or the man I call my dad, is really my stepfather. My mom was married before. My biological dad was Native American, and they did not stay married very long. So Bobby, who I know as my dad, came into the picture, and my parents were hippies, and they openly would tell you that, they just were trying to find their way in life. He was a rock and roll musician. She was a waitress. They were the typical, I think, Lifetime movie of just kind of a hippie couple. And they really kind of found their way around different religions. They were Hindu for a while and just kind of didn't really seem to have a direction in life. And eventually they found their way to the Christian faith and through my mom's twin sister, my Aunt Dot. And from there, I think as children, we got to see them grow into just really loving, kind people from people who were kind of all over the place. And I think they would say the same thing, that it just kind of gave them a center, and they just became really compassionate, loving people. And I think as children, when you see that firsthand, that probably influences your life, your entire life and your faith journey, because when you've seen people without Christ and then you see them with Christ and you see this just huge change in them, I think that really changes just the way that you look at faith in general.
When I think of your dad, I do think of the Kmart parking lot. Do you mind talking about that a little bit?
No. So we were kind of the, I think we pretty much stuck out in most environments we were in as children, because even in 1975, when I was born, there weren't a lot of families that had 5 children. And in a lot of the school situations we were in, we were the minority children because we lived in the inner city. We lived in some sketchier kind of neighborhoods because that was where we could afford to pay rent. And I think because of that, we grew up with maybe a worldview that was maybe a little broader, just because we got to see people of all different walks of life and all different cultures from a really early age. And we were poor. We struggled to survive. I think my parents had 4 or 5 jobs at one point. Everything from at one point my dad had a shrimp truck, which my mom, she's a really amazing person in every way, but she has always just taught us that we could do anything in life, and I don't feel like as children we ever had any limits. And so she would say, "You're smart, go figure it out," that kind of thing. And so, we saw her rebuild my dad's shrimp truck engine. Yeah, they couldn't afford to fix it, so she just figured out how to rebuild it. She fiberglassed the floor and installed plumbing and, just things you don't traditionally see a mom do in the 70s and 80s. And so, she built bookshelves, she sewed, she cooked, she painted, she could do it all, and made it all look easy. It just taught us to just figure out what we wanted to do and do it, which was great. And so, we, at one point, and just out of necessity, the children were always involved in, fundraising for the family because we had to pay the light bill and, all this. So at one point in time, my sister and I still fondly remember our journey of selling plumes in the Kmart parking lot. They were these very long feather decor items. And so we've done a little bit of everything from shrimp deheading to plume selling, but they're really fun memories, and I think we were always a really close family, and my 3 sisters and I especially, and my brother too, but we have always remained really close, and I think partially because we were always, together and always kind of on a team trying to help the family make it. So it's good.
What I remember about that is seeing your dad, and he would have his Bible open.
Yes.
In the truck. Mm-hmm. And that's stuck in my memory now for over 50 years. And I mean, it was a signal, if you will, to me that something had happened to Bobby. He was becoming a different person, if you will.
And he really, from the beginning, I think my dad always showed us a really sincere authentic faith, where there wasn't just like a list that we were just, checking boxes for, but it was really just this transformative, we want to be better people. We want to, be people who don't have hate in our heart for anybody, who love everyone and help anybody we can, because that's just what's in us, And so it's a great way to be brought up because those were values that they didn't just talk about. We did see faith in action from both of our parents, and there was never a time growing up where someone asked them for help that they didn't help. From the beginning, they always did the best they could. And I mean, at one point, we were poor enough that, you don't have to take up a charity donation now. I mean, they're fine. But I remember my dad having to walk to work because he didn't have $1 to ride the bus. And we lived on Gaston Street at the time. So that was a long walk from Forsyth Park to the mall where he worked at the record bar, And around that same time, seeing him pull out $1 from his wallet and give it to somebody that needed it, because he would still would give anything to anybody who asked, because he felt like that was what was the right thing to do, and so that was just an amazing way to grow up, to see parents who don't just talk about those kind of values, but who really show, we have this much food, so we'll share whatever we have.
You go to college, you get your degree, gives you a chance to focus on children. Do you take a straight job and then fall into the nonprofit sector? Or let's kind of go with your journey, college forward, if we could.
Well, I was very focused in college, and I think my parents would tell us, if you work at the 7-Eleven down the street, we're proud of you no matter what. There was not like an expectation, but at the same time, they would openly say, if you don't want to struggle financially like we do, you might want to stay in school and get a better job, or you're going to be doing the same thing we're doing, which I think resonated with all of us. And all of my siblings went to college, and most of us graduate school and had really successful careers, because we knew that education was the way to, a more financially stable future than what my parents had growing up. And so I was very focused. I didn't date. I didn't, I said, I'm going to get an education first, and I'm going to be able to support myself and never have to get married unless I decide to, and just kind of held true to that, and came back to Savannah after graduate school, and got a job at Memorial Hospital, working in pediatric rehab. So I did speech pathology for 9 years there, and saw children for everything from speech problems to a lisp to feeding problems, and then started doing a lot of inpatient care with trauma victims, little children who'd have accidents, coma therapy, things like that, cochlear implant therapy, and loved every minute of it. I just had a really wonderful career there, and then retired a little early. I met my husband at the hospital. He was a pediatric resident there, and he from the beginning, I said, well, I wouldn't marry him. I wouldn't marry him until he finished his residency, and I knew he was staying here because didn't want to leave my sisters because we were all so close. So he proved himself. he got a job and stayed in Savannah. So I agreed to marry him because he is an amazing man, and love him. We both love children, and just instantly had this amazing chemistry from day one. Got married 4 years later, and we have 3 little boys, little stair-step boys. And at some point in time, I think we were just about to have our first child when he decided to go out on his own and start his own practice. And so that led to a early retirement for me because it turned out that hiring an office staff was going to be more than I was making at the hospital. So I became kind of the office staff so that I could bring my first little boy with me, and which was amazing. We opened Coastal Pediatrics when my oldest son was 6 weeks old, and he just kind of like my mom did before me. We just made it work. We figured out how to do everything with baby in a sling, and just kind of kept moving. And then we went on to have two other little boys after Davis. And I think really what started kind of changing in my heart, my husband, after we had our third little boy, he was about 8 days old when my husband started having really terrible, he had his first really serious seizure. Yes, and no no kind of medical issues, no problems, just had this horrible seizure. And it kind of just made me start doing a lot of thinking about the future, about just legacy, about compassion for people, and just kind of, I think just kind of brought back a lot of, I don't know, I think my focus for my young adulthood was kind of just being financially successful, being, having the things that I thought I wanted in life. And I always had strong faith, from an early age, and really never strayed from that. But I think after he started having seizures, and I started noticing things in my children that as a parent I felt like were really hard to see, especially growing up so humbly, to see my children not really understand any type of need in the world. My oldest was 7. My other two boys were 2 and 4. And we would talk about, there would be, one day there were people waiting at a bus stop, and my oldest said, what are those people doing? And I told him they were waiting on a bus. And he said, well, why don't they just take their car? And I said, well, baby, they probably don't have a car. They're waiting, and he kind of jokingly said, well, everybody's got a car. And my husband said, everybody he knows has a car. And that was just kind of like a dagger to me as a parent. I was like, okay, he doesn't know anybody that doesn't own a car, and we started thinking about these little boys who were going to private school and living in a gated neighborhood, and just really didn't have a clue about the outside world, and my husband and I both felt really strongly that, especially as parents of faith, that it was our responsibility to, not just raise children who are successful in life, but raise children who want to make a difference and care about people in the world and serve other people. We were both raised that way. So to see them just kind of have this entitled attitude, even as really young children, I kept thinking, this is not going to change by itself. So what can we do to make this better? And it kind of started with, we were just going to find somewhere and volunteer with them. And at the time, we were taking the boys to church. We were taking them to the nursing homes at Christmas, that kind of thing. But it just wasn't enough. And, looking back at all that I knew about child development, at those ages, children only know what's in front of them. They only know what they see. And so if they don't ever see a child who doesn't have food, then they don't understand childhood hunger. And if they don't see people that don't have shoes on their feet, they're not going to understand that there are people that don't have clothing and are in need in the world. And so we really started just kind of looking for somewhere that would be a good fit. And we figured out really fast that nobody in Savannah really wanted children running around their warehouse. So we actually could not find one nonprofit that would let us come and volunteer.
With your children?
with my children.
So, got it.
And
Okay.
so, and we thought, at this point, talking about it is not enough. So we've got to have an action. We've got to have a step where we're taking them out and showing them that there are needs, kind of in a safe way. And, I wasn't really ready to take them under the bridge to feed homeless people, but I wanted there to be some kind of awareness on their part. And, at the same time, I have a brother-in-law, also a really strong man of faith, who would talk about his journey into teaching. So he started out as a first or second grade teacher, and he was a middle class child, went to BC, private school, and when he started teaching, it was very shocking to him how many children in his classroom struggled with hunger, and they would see children come to school on Monday who couldn't hold their head up because they didn't have enough energy. They maybe eat school lunch and breakfast during the week, but when the weekend rolls around, they don't have enough food to eat at home. And so there was kind of an epidemic of children who would go to the nurse on Mondays because they had headaches and stomach aches and just hadn't had enough food to eat. And that really struck a chord with me because even though we were poor growing up, we had a meal. We were the family that didn't have leftovers, but they were gone. We never had a pantry because we didn't have extra food. But we always had a meal. And so many of the children in our public school system don't have that. And so we would hear teacher after teacher just talk about this. So we started packing food bags at our house, just in our kitchen. And the boys and I would just go to Sam's and buy food. And we would pack up these little bags, and they would make little cards and put them in the bags. And our oldest was in school, but the two younger boys would go to the school with me. This was pre-COVID, so things were a lot more open. And they would allow us to just hand these out on Fridays to the children, and they would take the bags home from school on Friday so they would have food for the weekend.
And this is roughly what year are we in now?
So this was about 2011, 2012. And
And your boys are like 7 and 5 and
2 and 4.
2 and 4, okay,
2
got
and
it.
4 and 7.
yeah, wow.
And so the 2 and 4-year-old would come with me to the school, and we would pull our little wagon with our bags in it, and the children would be lined up to go to the bus. And eventually it got to where the school asked us to hand out other bags that were brought to the school by Backpack Buddies and some other organizations. But it was mostly, 5 or 10 bags here. And we would look at some of these bags, and they would just have either food that children wouldn't really eat in them, like there were bags with MRE rations, which I'm pretty sure is illegal since the children aren't military. But, a can of Spam and a fork. And just not enough food to sustain a child over the weekend. Or some of the groups just didn't show up. And so we had this long line of children, and we would get to the end of our bags, and there were still children in line. Oh. And there really was a very strong sense that it felt like a mission trip to a third world country, where you see this long line of children with no socks on, dirty clothing, no belt, and just children that don't really look like they're being taken care of. And they're hugging you and high-fiving you and so excited to see you at the school because you're giving them a bag of food. Oh. And that was kind of just a dagger to my heart. It was just overwhelming to me that we lived a mile away and we were throwing away leftovers, and there were children right down the street who didn't have enough to eat. So it kind of was this aha moment where, during this time, I was kind of working just a few hours, but not really working much at my husband's office, and their office had grown to a really big office. And I thought, what am I doing that's so important that I can't help with this, you know? And so we just started, it just was a very natural process of just talking to our friends that had children about the same age. And I think when you have young children, you know other people who have young children because people with older children don't want to hang out with you at the soft play locations and the parks and, you know. So you're kind of all in this together. And I had a lot of friends at that time who had the same faith where we really felt compelled to raise children who loved and served other people. And this just felt like a really great thing to do with them, just to expose them to needs that were right there in front of them and give them a way that they could meet them, you know. And so our group just kind of kept growing until the line at the school was kind of wrapped around the building. And it just, we were kind of a redneck tailgate for a while. We would, after church, everybody would sign up and say, you know, I'll bring 24 cans of corn or whatever, you know, and then we would get these bags packed once a month and kind of have a little food packing party. And then the kids and I would take them to the school on Fridays and hand them out.
And all this is done, I mean, you don't have any nonprofit status?
No,
This
this was just, we were just doing it, just
Okay, got it.
informal.
Mhm,
And
yeah.
then eventually, my husband and I go to Compassion Christian East Campus, which is like a small little satellite campus. And during that time, the church was building a children's building and had bought a portable classroom that was kind of like a trailer with kind of like a wide trailer. And when the children's building was built, they didn't have a use for the building. So we were borrowing the gym, which turned into the children's building, which became, they allowed us just to meet there and have people come from all over town and help pack up bags. And so we kind of just did this Facebook invite. Like, we weren't a nonprofit, we were just a group. And we said, anybody that wants their family to come and help pack bags, just come and help us. So it just was a very organic start. People, it just kind of blew up really fast from a really small, you know, kitchen table project to, you know, 50 or 100 people showing up to help pack bags. And we were approached, so our pastor just said, well, you know, this building is hooked up to power and water and sewage and all of this, and y'all are welcome just to have it. You can stay here as long as you want to and bring anybody you want to help you pack bags. So it was 900 square feet. We loved it because we could let our tables stay set up, and, you know, it allowed us to pack a lot more bags and help a lot more food, a lot more children. And then we transitioned to being a nonprofit because we just wanted to help more kids and wanted to be able to apply for grants and things like that so we could do more with our money and be able to go to the food bank and get food at a discount and these kind of things. And we really never went to people and said, hey, do you want to be a part of us? We just kept having people want to come join, which was great. We had a lot of businesses, Publix, The Gap, just call and say, hey, we heard y'all are packing bags. Would you mind if we come and pack bags with you? And so then people started asking to come on field trips. And we were 900 square feet with no bathroom. I mean, we had one bathroom and no air conditioning and no windows. So we were there for 4 years, and people kept coming despite the lack of comfort. We were amazed. It was the middle of summer, and people came in and sweated it out with us. And
Why do you think that is?
I think really people, especially people with children and people with families, really wanted the same thing that we wanted. They wanted their children to have an active faith where they could reach out and help people and know that they weren't helping an organization, they were helping children. And so from day one, we just said, we're not going to pay ourselves. We're going to make this a volunteer organization. And 11 years later, we've stayed with that same motto. We
There are no staff salary.
no staff. So 11 years later, we have an 11,000 square foot warehouse right down the street from here. And we had 18,000 volunteers last year, which is incredible. And the same thing, really, people just, I think when you can break it down to a really simple idea of what do we need to do to help these kids? And you say, well, here's something we practically can do, and you allow people to come in and help. I think most people are naturally good and want to do good in the world. So, our philosophy, they say, well, do we have to go to your church to pack bags? Do we have to, and we don't really care who a person is. If they want to help, they're welcome, So our volunteer population, I feel like, is a very diverse group of people from all walks of life. You'll have bank presidents packing next to somebody that came from safe shelter to help for the day, who's a domestic violence victim, and we have group homes that bring adults with special needs to pack bags. It's a very simple process, so pretty much anybody can participate in it. And we've learned over the past 11 years how to just break it down to the simplest little building blocks, and just invited people in to help. So we have sit-down jobs and stand-up jobs and thinking jobs and kind of robotic jobs where you just mutter through and get it done, so.
Do you think about the jobs in that way? There's sit-down jobs, there's stand-up jobs.
Well,
I mean,
I've always loved organization. Like, I love being able to look at something and try to think of an easier way to do it, and try to
you have
think
any idea
of
where that came from in you?
my mother,
Yeah.
definitely, 100%, 100%. And so, for example, we have, because if you think about who's available to volunteer in the middle of the daytime during the work week, you get a lot of older adults who, a lot of our volunteers have had a teaching profession or nursing profession, and they still want to help people, and they have plenty of time and years left to help. And so when they come in, to be able to have everything where anybody can participate is a really big deal. So all of our trash cans are on wheels, so nobody has to pick them up. All of our food bags go into carts that can be pushed. So there are heavier lifting jobs if people want them, but they aren't required to do them. And, that's been, I think, a big part of it is being accommodating and flexible with people, and we love being able to just kind of figure out how to allow somebody to help.
So for you, that's a good thought exercise. If somebody shows up and it's not obvious how they can help, instead of saying, we don't think we know how to involve you.
Right.
That's the learning moment for you.
Right.
Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
And really from the beginning, we've had kind of a twofold mission. And the first part of it being to take care of the physical needs of children that are in crisis. So food, clothing, toiletries, just basic needs that people have. And the other part of the mission is to empower and inspire people to serve. And to do it in child and family friendly ways, because that was, from the beginning what we were looking for. So in our building, we have our big packing room has 6 tables, and the smallest table is a foot shorter than all the others, so that we can have preschoolers come on field trips and they can independently pack bags of food. And
So who thought of that? Who actually got that to happen?
Well, it was my idea,
Uh-huh.
but I'm not mechanical like my mom is. So I'm smart enough to ask for help. So when I have somebody say, I'm handy, what can I do? I say, well, how can we build a table that's just like these but shorter, and how can we, be practical but have things last a really long time, So we ended up buying workbench tops to these really long, very durable tables, and just had volunteers build 2x4 bottoms and just painted them nicely and made them all match and called it a day. So,
If I could, one of the things that interests me about what you're now describing is your remarkable attention to detail. And when you said, so we did this so everything looked the same and all that, in my experience, generally, many times organizations that are there to kind of be responsive to people who are economically poor don't seem to mind to respond to them in kind of poorly looking ways.
mm-hmm.
But that's not when people walk into your 11,000 foot warehouse, first, how many people can be in that warehouse as volunteers in a day? What's the traffic flow?
Well, so Thursdays are our biggest.
Do me a favor, please. Start out, say where you are.
Okay.
There on Thursdays, so we know.
Yeah, pack on
Okay.
Thursday, yeah, okay.
So at PAC on Thursdays in our warehouse, we have really big groups of people sometimes. 150, 200 people will come in and pretty much just find different jobs to do. We pre-set up jobs in different areas, and then people come in, and we do the same thing over and over again. And so the process is pretty easy for people to learn. But what was, I think, the most important to us from the very beginning is that this was always the best we had. And so I think what a lot of people that are poor and have to request help, what they're used to is getting people's leftovers. And there's kind of just this mentality that, once we're finished with something, we just give it to the poor and they'll love it. And, people that are poor don't really want people spotted up, wadded up, used clothing either, And so, if that's all you have, sure, you wear it, but it's different when you're given the best that you have. And what that means, as a parent is we make trades for things. I know you want all 4 of those Nike shirts, but you know what? We could buy you 2 of those, and then we can buy a couple for somebody else. So pick the 2 you want, and then we're going to buy the same thing that we just bought for you for somebody else, because it's important to us that you learn from an early age that you should give people things that you want, and give people things that are your best. And, there is some practicality about it. Sure, we're going to put it with the Target shorts and the name brand shirt to spread out the resources. But there definitely is that sense when people come into PAC that this is the best we have. And I think that compels people who want to leave a legacy and want to leave their mark somewhere to say, if I can end a teaching career where I devoted my whole life to children, and I can come to this place and feel like I can do even more good with the best that I have, then they want to come there and they want to be involved. My best volunteer right now, my right-hand lady, came to me about 4 years ago. We went to church together, but we were acquaintances. She's probably 10 years older than I am, and maybe a little older than that. Don't tell her I said that. I don't really know. But anyway, she was a teacher from the Atlanta school system, taught in really poor downtown schools in Atlanta, and came here to teach at Haven Elementary School. Retired here, lives at the Landings with her family. And she taught at Haven for several years, and then when she came to the age where she can retire, she decided that she would retire to help me full-time for free. And her reasoning was, she said, I have seen firsthand all the needs that these children have, and I feel like I can do so much good here. And this is what I want to do, you know? And so my employees are just these amazing people who have just kind of devoted their life to helping. And so I think that kind of inspires all of us. And we do have, I think, we do bring in volunteers that are more affluent volunteers because they're comfortable there. And the reason is because it's clean, it smells good, it's organized, and it's the best that we have because we want to feel proud of it because that's where our legacy is. That's where our investment of time and resources and everything else is. So we constantly brainstorm about how we can make it better, how we can make it a better, not just volunteer experience, but our ultimate goal is for the kids that come in to feel the warmth and the love that goes into what we do for them. So we do field trips at our building. And so children come from private schools, just like my boys did, to learn about children in need. And when you can tell a second grader that a mile from their school, there are hundreds of children that don't have food on the weekends, it exposes them to something they don't know about most of the time. And at that age, children are naturally compassionate. And so it's different than talking to adults because 9 times out of 10, one of the kids will raise their hand and say, I have food at my house and I'll bring it. There's an action step immediately. This is something, I had a first grader from a little private school listen to this compelling argument for children his same age who didn't have food. And he raised his hand and said, we have 18 kids in our class. If we all brought an extra snack for a month, we could feed a class somewhere else snacks that didn't have snacks in their classroom. And, that's what we're looking for, is to just get these little minds working on, not just how can I educate myself and make money and have a successful life, but how can I think about other people? How can I give to other people? And how can that just be like a natural part of life for kids? And the other group of field trips that we get are children who come from schools that we take bags to. And the children come and they're able to be, most of them for the first time, a part of helping other people instead of just being the recipients of charity. And I think that changes who they are, and it's always their favorite field trip because they feel it naturally. It feels good to help people.
They get to do something.
They get to do something.
Yeah, they get to
And when they walk through our building, other than the food, we have 2 other programs. One of them is a duffel bag program for children in need. And the children who get our duffel bags are children, many of them are homeless. And in Savannah, we have several hundred children who are homeless. And by homeless, the definition is they don't have a permanent address. And where schools come in, the concern for them is these children a lot of times don't have just basic things that they need to return to school. And so their goal is to get them back to school. And our goal is to give them the basics so they can go back to school. Usually the duffel bags will have about a week's worth of clothes in them. They have socks, underwear, pajamas, toiletries, and everything's new. And the reason that everything's new is, like we talked about before, we want to give the kids a fresh start. And we want to say, as a community, we're not just checking a box that we gave you what you needed to return to school. We want you to have a better life. We want to give the best we have so that you can feel the love and encouragement that we have for you because we want you to have a better life, And so everything that we can do to make those bags just really special, we put little tags and put the child's name on the bag. And for many of the kids, that's all they have are the items in their bag, So a lot of the children, we serve everything from human trafficking victims, children going into foster care. We serve all the shelters, all the hospitals in town, the fire department, the police department, the courts, and all the schools here.
Let me stop you there just so I can get my head around this a little bit. So do you have like, well, first, how many children do you feel like, we've talked about 18,000 volunteers, go to the other side of the equation, how many children do you think like you interact with in a given day, week, month, and year?
In 2023, PAC put together and delivered over 200,000 care bags that went out into the community to children. So each week we provide about 4,600 bags of food that go home with kids on Fridays. And every month we provide between 125 to 150 of these duffel bags that have clothing, toiletries, toys, just whatever a child that age would need or want. And then part of that duffel bag system also is we have a cottage behind our building that is a little handy home. And during COVID, we got some help from Habitat. They weren't building houses, and so some of the volunteers came and refaced the front of this little handy home. And we added a keypad so that when children need things in the middle of the night, the emergency providers can come back there, put in a code, and they can get a bag for a child. Because the truth of the matter is that when they find a child in human trafficking or a child goes into foster care, a lot of times it's 2 a.m. or it's a Saturday night, and there isn't anywhere open that can help them. So this just allows us to be open 24 hours a day. So I think that part of our program will be the part that grows into other counties eventually, because there are a lot of places surrounding Savannah where they need resources. And this allows us to do it. It's really a very low to no cost way to be able to serve children. So we don't allow individuals to come, but the service providers have to come to an orientation. And then we give them a code, and we have a camera in there. And we've never had any trouble. And we're working on opening our second little cottage. And these little cottages were actually where we originally stored our food. So before we had our building, when we had the little trailer that we were packing in, we bought these little handy homes, and we'd store the packed food in it to hand out at the schools.
Well, this sort of goes to my, I mean, now that you're talking, I mean, you've got 11,000 square feet. of
Yes,
warehouse.
yes.
You've got handy homes.
Yes.
You have like 15 trucks?
No.
What's
we
and I'm
we
also
have
curious.
figured out the lowest cost way to do pretty much everything. So, and you know, that part of it is very important to us too, because that way, so we have a few churches and foundation grants that help us pay for our overhead, which our overhead is basically the light bill, the cable bill, and the mortgage on our building. So, and now our building is a nonprofit space, so we don't pay property tax, which is really nice. But everything else, if an individual or anybody else donates to PAC, 100% of it just goes to buy food and clothing and toiletries, which is great.
And you can say that
And
to
kind of unheard of.
yes, and you can say that to your donors.
Yes, which is amazing.
In good conscience.
In good conscience. And so we have a truck, we have a Ford Transit van that is a big giant van that was donated by J.C. Lewis Ford, and it's kind of like a free lease deal for us. So we pay the insurance, and the van pretty much runs every day, all day, and it has a ramp in the back. So the food bags go into these big carts and are pushed onto the van from our loading dock and go out to the schools. And then we have about 20 community volunteers who each take an hour, and they come the same hour every week, and they go to a school, pick up the empty carts, and leave the full ones. So they go the same route every week. So that's how we get all the bags to the schools, and then on Fridays they go home with the kids.
So, okay, let me, how, who keeps all this organized and how do you do information management?
It is always a battle. It's always a battle because we pretty much rely on volunteers for all of our different needs. And it's kind of like you don't even know what you need until you grow and then have a problem and have to figure out how to solve it. So we're always kind of in flux where we're figuring out how to pivot a little bit and change the way we're doing things to make them easier and better. So probably our weakest area right now is administrative because it's me and I run out of hours. So a lot of us, I mean, right now I probably work about 50 hours a week, and pretty much I'm home when my kids are home, and the other hours are really early morning and really late at night, and just do whatever has to be done. And my philosophy is whatever needs doing, it's what I'm going to do. So, but I try to replace myself where I can, and yield to people that are smarter at different areas than I am, and give them some room to just take ownership of an area that they will do a lot better job of than I will.
Do you have critics?
Yes, so when you have 18,000 volunteers, people are really quick to tell you what you're not doing the right way. And overall, I would say our biggest criticism is not really a problem, but people want more times to volunteer, more. A lot of times people want to volunteer when they want to volunteer, which may not be when we're open. I mean, we've had people ask to come in at 9:00 at night and, you know, can we bring our family tonight at 9? And we're like, well, we're not going to be there. But we do have we're flexible in that we recognize, because we rely on volunteers, that we do have to let some of them have a little bit of independence with doing what they're tasked to do. So we have different churches, different businesses that come in during the week and lead their own packing events at our facility. And so we've just basically taught them how to restock our tables, and we do it the same way every time. We have pictures and little, charts on how to restock it, and we provide all the materials for them to restock the table and pack it and go. And so when we're not there, there's still food being packed. So through that process, and, we have the capacity to do about twice as much as we're doing now with the same facility, given the number of volunteers we have. So pretty much the biggest sticking point is just the resources to buy more and more food as the costs go up.
That's right. You've talked about how PAC, your organization, has grown organically.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have now that you're 12 years in, and I mean the size growth, etc., I mean, do you have a more formal way of thinking about what you want to be doing in 5 years or 10 years, or is it still more like we're going to take it day by day? And
we definitely have goals. I think when we started, we just really wanted to help kids. And so we were very open to, like, what is our path? What is our goal here? And then probably about 5 years ago, we kind of centered in on, we're not going to be able to do all of this. So we're going to if we want to do a good job with what we're doing, we're going to say this is what we're going to do, and we're going to do it really well. And then, we're open to the possibility that down the road that vision could expand. But it's, the part where you get to really give people a purpose. And we have so many volunteers that come to us really just looking for purpose in life. And when they come in and find something that they just feel really good about doing, it just makes them want to do more and be there more and invest more. And they talk about it So they bring their friends and their friends, and so that part of it is, I think, one of the biggest things I didn't foresee from the beginning was just that part where you just get to help people find a place, which is amazing. We love it. And, people, not everybody has the same philosophy for helping. We have people who will come in and say, well, if you feed poor kids, you're just replicating the cycle and they're just going to grow up to be people, we just kind of feel like they're hungry kids and we're going to feed them. And we do think there are other jobs along the way, but they're not ours. So we're not taking ownership of those. But besides the duffel bags and the food, we also have a beautiful boutique in the back of our building. And it's always everybody's favorite part because it would, I think it would stand up to a boutique on Broughton Street in downtown Savannah. And when our children who come there on a field trip walk through that building, every single one of them says, I want to shop in here. And that gives us a chance to teach them what I was able to teach my children, which is, when we give to people and it's something that we would want and we're proud of it, it feels really good. And I think when they can walk through that idea at 7 or 8 years old, then it changes how they give as adults, and the way that they see life. And then, all of that is there and so much love and time is put into it that when the foster kids come in, immediately they feel loved and we haven't had one who has come in and not just, I feel like, just melted. Their barriers just kind of melt because there's this thought that children get, especially as teenagers, why are you helping me? Why are you doing this? And I think when they realize our only motive is to love them and to really just serve them and make their life better, I think they feel that, And the amazing part to me is that when kids come in, I always thought, well, will we talk about faith? Will we talk about our faith with the kids? Will we, because we're writing our own rules here. What do we, and honestly, most of the children that come in know that we're Christians. They will say, well, you love God, don't you? Or and it's funny because it's kind of an intangible thing that I think adults don't feel, but children do. And we don't ever have to say much, and just the faith is tangible to them because of the love that they see,
So it is faith in action.
It definitely is faith in
And
action.
they see that, and so they get the whole deal.
Yes,
It's faith in action.
they really do.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm trying to think of more questions to ask you, and I may not be able to. So what I'm saying to you now is, if there are parts of your story that I've not been able to give you a way to bring forward, feel free.
Well, I would say that one really interesting part of this journey with starting a nonprofit, people will ask, well, would you have done it over again? Would you have done it the same way? And first of all, I do think that a journey into helping is similar to a faith journey in that now there's no way if you said, okay, I want you to feed 4,600 children every week and run this warehouse and climb these ladders and bring all this stuff here and do all this stuff. I never would sign up for that, and I don't think anybody else would. So you start with a really simple yes, and what can I do from where I am? And it's just those small steps that I think just kind of take you on a path of faith and of helping and growing, both as a person and just as a leader, where you learn this worked really well and this didn't. So, when you lead a big organization, you definitely feel the microscope of you can see your flaws and what you need to fix about yourself, or just things that you could do differently to, because you see the reaction it has from people and what what it produces. And really, one really incredible thing that I've learned. I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of missionaries and people who are in serving fields, but what I consider to be, they're not going home to an air conditioned house. They're living in the jungle somewhere and doing this. So even though we serve, I really don't consider us to be in the same stratosphere as people that leave their whole life behind to go live in a foreign country to help people. But I've heard a lot of them talk about how people in our country really don't have the chance to see miraculous things happen because they don't really have to have big faith. Dinner shows up, this shows up, and, where they're, sitting in a hut praying for dinner and a chicken runs by at that exact moment and they know it's a miracle, And so in the beginning stages, I would hear these stories and, just kind of file them away and think, well, we're not really doing that here. But as time has progressed and the scope of what we do has grown so much, it got beyond where my husband and I were able to write a check for the food we needed, and when our food bills became, $67,000 a month for, buying food. And you're talking about an organization with no marketing, no grant writers, no, you just kind of, and we really have seen just these really miraculous things happen. I mean, for one, there's never been a week where we weren't able to deliver food to schools, and help the kids. Not one school has gone without one bag of food in 11 years. We were open every day during COVID. We didn't get it. We were out in the community passing out food and housing projects to children who had COVID and no mask, and we were somehow in a little protective bubble through all of that, which was amazing. I mean, just amazing. But we've gotten to see some other really cool things happen. I'll tell you a really neat story. So when we started having really hard struggles with getting food, and a lot of it happened because the federal grants changed. A lot of the federal grants that were just aimed at serving poor people became COVID relief grants. So they would go to food banks as COVID relief. Well, when COVID went away, the grants went away. They didn't reform back into grants feeding children that needed food. They just vanished. And so a lot of the food banks, including the food bank here, they didn't have funds to replace that. So there was no backup plan. And so when you're an organization that needs, 4,600 of each item, and you have to pay retail or collect it or find it or get it with no equipment, it's a big it's a really big logistics undertaking. And we've learned how to do everything from buying, I call it black market food, but it's not. It's go to pallet liquidators and buy things that are we bought 6 pallets of juice that were 45 days from their expiration, but we can use that much juice in 2 weeks, so we're good. But we saved $7,000 off of what we would pay, at a food bank for that juice. So we're learning how to use our money wisely and resource things, but we had some amazing just compassion and outpouring of generosity from Crider Foods in South Georgia. Started donating 2 pallets of canned chicken every month, which is about, close to $100,000 worth of food a year. So when that donation happened, we started thinking, how can we get other companies just to give us 1 pallet of food? And but if we do that, we've got to have somewhere to put the food. And it sounds like an 11,000 square foot warehouse is huge, but we're completely out of space. So we don't have anywhere to store food. So one day we're standing at our back door and we look out and there's a warehouse probably 100 yards away. That's just this small warehouse. And Susan, who's my volunteer who quit teaching to come help me full time for free, we're standing there and she said, "Where'd that warehouse come from?" And I said, "I don't know. We'd never noticed it before because we're in there working. We're not really like standing outside looking around us." So I said, "Well, you know what? I'm going to get online and figure out who owns that warehouse and call and see if they're interested in selling it." So I get online, figure out who owns it, call them. And I really, in my heart, felt like they were going to say, "If y'all need this warehouse, you can have the warehouse." Because I don't know why. I just felt like, why would that not work out, So I call and they say, "No, we're not interested in selling it. We, our family owns a lot of property. We renovate them and do long-term leases, and that's how our family makes our income. We own a lot of properties, no thank you." So I just kind of said, "Well, if you ever decide to sell it, let us know." And so Susan and I started walking around this warehouse on Fridays, praying that nobody would lease it, which is kind of a mean prayer, right? So it's 100 yards from our building, and really with this whole, it was kind of just like this whole intentional prayer of, God, we know that if we're going to feed more kids and continue to grow this effort and to make it sustainable, we're going to have to start getting more donations outside of the food bank from other places because we don't have enough food. So we don't know if this is our warehouse or not, but somewhere close by, because we don't want to add employees or the cost of employees, we really need more space. So in October, nothing had really happened, and I called the man who owned the warehouse and said, "Would you come talk to me about leasing the warehouse?" I didn't really want to lease because it was just kind of dumping money down a hole, and as a nonprofit, it's really hard to get a grant for a lease. But we knew we needed the space to be able to ask companies to donate stuff. So he comes and talks to me about the lease, and as he's leaving, he says, "Well, we haven't really been able to lease the space." I did not fess up that we'd been praying against him leasing the space, but we haven't been able to lease it, so we might be interested in selling it. So before I could think of anything else to say, I just kind of said, "Well, we don't have any money to buy it, but we would love to lease it for a year. If you would be willing to give us a purchase price up front, we could try to fundraise to buy this building." So he talked to his family. They agreed. They gave us a really good deal with them kind of writing off part of the price since we were a nonprofit. And the next day I came into my warehouse and one of my volunteers said, "I heard you talking to the guy yesterday and I feel really compelled to pay for half that property. And I want to pay for half of it." And this is a volunteer who drives a Subaru. She's not, rolling in money, but just a really dedicated volunteer. And so I said, "Well, could we do something to commemorate your husband who passed away?" She has no children. She said, "I'm 76 years old. I have no children. My husband has passed away, and I don't want anything to commemorate him. I just want you to be able to answer that God made a way," which is really amazing in a world where most people want their name on buildings and things. But really that was her only intention through the process, was just to, do the right thing and leave a legacy of loving people and caring about people, And so that's the kind of volunteers I'm surrounded by, which is an incredible thing, not just for them, but for me, because when we're thinking, "Oh, I don't want to move any more corn today," or whatever it is for the day, You're thinking, well, all of these people are kind of inspiring you at the same time to keep going because they're willing to sacrifice whatever they have to help also,
Well, it seems like what you've been able to do is, I mean, this notion of sort of creating a better world, right? So there's that. But also what's happened is you have created a world of good around you. And how many people get to live inside a world of good? Not many. And
It is an incredible
you
thing
do.
to be surrounded by so many people who just really care about people and love people. And, we've really seen an experience where people around us of all different walks of faith, all different backgrounds are able to come together and are kind of just bonded in what they agree on, which is helping and wanting people to, especially children, to have a better life. And it's exciting also because we get to see all these really cool things happen, like the warehouse building. And the other half of that is, so 6 months later, we're 5% away from our goal of buying this building. And the same volunteer has already said, if you can't fundraise that 5%, I'll pay for that too. And we're like, no, we're going to do this here. You've done enough. But we will also own the car wash, which is in front of us. And miraculously, this old junky looking car wash, although it's probably 70 or 80 years old, doesn't have one crack in it. It's a brick car wash, and we're going to turn it into storage units. So we'll be able to store food and school supplies and really allow even more compartmentalized kind of helping for groups to be able to step in and manage one of our units and help. So we're excited about the whole journey.
So people from all walks of life who come from all different faith homes have found a home for themselves with some purpose.
Yes.
Yeah. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this. I know they have, and I know that the people that will be able to watch this videotape in perpetuity, because the city archives will archive it that way, will appreciate it. And just at a personal note, you're a genius. No, you're a genius. You're an organizational genius. I mean, I've been around nonprofits for 50 years. I know the traps. I know the rabbit holes. You've avoided them. It's unbelievable to me.
So sweet. Well, thank
It's
you.
true. You've just avoided so many of the rabbit holes. Anyway, that ain't gonna take.
Well, we love it, and it's it's amazing to be with people who love being there. We just
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
get to do it.
And then just let that be on tape. I'm just curious. I mean, how do you manage? I mean, I'm assuming that you get invited to speak at lots of different conferences, and that people want you to become, the face of their. I mean, it would just seem to me that the amount of opportunity you have to dilute your focus is extreme. How do you think about that?
Well, oddly enough, we haven't. So we've stayed very clear of ever forming any kind of political alliance, because I always kind of just want to be an organization that's aligned with peace for all people, and I just, so for that reason, I've kind of stayed away from the political realm. But really, we're, believe it or not, outside of a lot of the public radar. So if people are grandparents or parents and they have children, chances are they know about us because their kids have come on a field trip or that kind of thing. But really, I would say in the corporate world, I think we're not really on the radar, which I'm not really bothered by, because it just kind of allows me to keep doing, what I'm doing, and I love it. So we do have some corporate
Oh, sure.
affiliation, and you know, I enjoy the speaking part of it. I like interacting with people too, but I just love being there with the kids when they come in, and you know, getting to do that part of it. And so
Would you consider doing a TED Talk or something like that?
I would probably one day.
I think, I mean, again, just to my eye, so, the story is so instructive, and it's worked, right? I mean, but the story is so instructive, and there's some, in my opinion, there's some universal insights in that story that people could glean, I think. Anyway,
Well,
well,
it's,
thank you again.
thank you.
Gosh.
Thank you all for doing
Yeah,
all of
you.
this. I appreciate it so
Good.
much.
I don't know.
So sweet to include me.